For many, video games are a way to escape the mundane and the impractical and step into worlds that are infinitely more exciting, spooky, or just plain weirder than the one we actually inhabit. One of the most important aspects of this escapism is not having to do all the same pesky tasks our lives are filled with, unless we choose to, of course, thus making the experience one that's altogether less pedestrian than our day-to-day existence. Over the years, video game developers have created several features and mechanics designed specifically to make our time in these virtual worlds all the more enjoyable. And once a new idea proves popular with players, every studio starts looking for a way to work it into their new title. Yesterday's delightful innovation becomes today's must-have, and before you know it, it's tomorrow, and we're all collectively rolling our eyes at games that don't include these helpful additions. I'm Ashton from TripleJump, and here are 10 brilliant video game features we couldn't live without. Number 10. Inventory sorting. If you're anything like us, you'll spend roughly half your time in any given game running around collecting as much stuff as possible, as this will inevitably lead to our protagonist's pockets being so packed with loot that they lose the ability to move. Being able to manage our hoarded bounty is an absolute vital skill. Satisfying though it may be to do this manually, it's also rather time-consuming. Thankfully, some games come with handy inventory sorting options. Sometimes this is as simple as allocating a button to sell all junk, thus liberating the player of numerous useless articles they've gathered. Other games, like the Resident Evil 4 remake, take it a step further and actually organise the player's entire inventory for them in order to maximise efficiency. To say that the auto-sort is a thing of beauty probably belies our incredibly particular tendencies, but it's one of those features that's disproportionately satisfying to employ. Once you've gotten used to a game organising your items for you, it's very hard to go back to doing it manually. And to think, our mums always swore that our messes would never tidy themselves. Number 9. Ladder slides. The act of climbing is probably a pretty old one, and somewhere along the way, humanity learned to do it the easy way. Instead of scrambling hand over hand up the sides of buildings, like some kind of 15th century assassin, we invented the ladder, thereby drastically improving the working lives of builders, window cleaners, and firefighters forever. As anyone lucky enough to have climbed a ladder in real life will know, it's not quite as exciting as it seems. And what's worse is that you don't just climb up, but you've also got to climb all the way back down as well. Honestly, it's exhausting. At some point though, someone decided that video game ladders should do away with the tedium of descent and implemented a mechanic that means on the way down, a handy button tap allows the player character to slide down the sides of the ladder without stopping on every rung like some sort of gravity-fearing chump. The ladder slide has become an integral part of game design, and it's genuinely frustrating playing a game without it. Descending a ladder 1 foot at a time now seems painfully slow, even though we'd never be brave enough to try the slide in real life. Number 8. Accessibility options. Hopefully, we can all agree that video games are for everyone. As such, inclusivity is absolutely essential, and the ever-growing spectrum of accessibility options is a must for modern games. For many, features like in-game subtitles are one of the first settings to seek out upon booting up a game. But the addition of colorblindness modes, audio description, and custom control schemes all help to further enable players to adapt games to meet their individual needs and preferences. What makes these features so great is that they're entirely optional, so players can pick and choose the ones they want and ignore those that they don't. For example, for every player that finds subtitles distracting, there's another who simply can't follow what's happening without them. The ability to toggle these settings on and off to make our gaming experiences as comfortable as possible is something that many couldn't live without, and it allows more people to enjoy video games. Though there's not yet a specific standard of accessibility that games are required to adhere to, the range of options afforded to players have grown significantly over recent years, with developers making a concerted effort to expand upon their game's accessibility. So it's surely only a matter of time before we don't have to live without these options at all. Number 7. Clear signalling of better/worse gear. In many video games, loot is everywhere, and it's almost impossible to deny the urge to pick it all up. Unfortunately, this almost always ends up with our inventories positively stuffed full of gear, and working out what to keep and what to drop quickly becomes a chore after reading through an endless list of stat boosts and armor ratings. Though it's still far from the norm, some games have an elegantly simple solution to this slightly ridiculous problem. Instead of expecting us to memorize and mentally contrast the stats of various various items in our inventories, some games do it for us, helpfully letting us know if something is an overall improvement or whether we should immediately throw it on the ground and forget it ever existed. It may not be enough to make games seem better or worse all on its own, but it is, without a doubt, one of the most helpful features in modern games. Switching up weapons and armor is something that's become standard across the RPG genre and beyond, so streamlining the decision-making process is something that saves us a great deal of time and frustration. Number 6. Side quests and additional content. At the risk of sounding like someone's grandma, video gaming kids today don't know how lucky they are, with all their side quests and whatnot. Once upon a time, games were a relatively linear journey from point A to point B, but as the medium has evolved, so too has the experience. Nowadays, no game seems complete unless it includes a little something extra. To say we couldn't live without it might seem extreme, but consider it carefully. In a world without collectibles, bonus modes, minigames, or hidden levels, what else is there? Just a story? We get enough of that nonsense from books, thank you very much. All jokes aside, modern games simply aren't designed to be straightforward. There's almost always something additional, whether it's hidden somewhere for us to find, or the game openly offers it up as a form of side quest or general distraction. Maybe we've been infected by the ungrateful millennial disease that our parents always warned us about, but it certainly feels as though offering us a little something more has just become the norm. Whether it's right or not, we don't want to live in a world without side quests and Easter eggs, and thankfully, it doesn't look like we'll ever have to. Number 5. Quest markers. The advent of the open world genre really did revolutionise the industry, and it seems that video games have been growing in size and scope ever since. With massive sprawling worlds to go out and explore, finding our way to specific people or places almost became the virtual version of finding a needle in a haystack. Luckily, some bright spark invented the quest marker to help us on our way. After being given a task to complete, the majority of games give us an immediate indication of how to find the next relevant quest point. With the sheer size of some game worlds, this is probably the best way to make sure players will actually be able to get to their destination, especially as most games are filled with countless distractions. The quest marker actually became so integral that it started to seem a little overdone, leading some games to try new methods of pointing us on our merry way. For example, Ghost of Tsushima used its stylized guiding wind to send players in the general direction of their next quest. Heck, some even offer us the option to turn off quest markers entirely, though after years of being helped along, completing a quest without being told where to go is something we doubt we're even capable of. Number 4. Skippable dialogue and cutscenes. Some of us love story-driven games, whereas others are all about the action. One thing we can all agree on though, is that we don't always want to hear every line of dialogue or watch every cutscene in full. Though the feature may be employed with maddening inconsistency, many games acknowledge our collective lack of patience by giving us the option to skip through some of the exposition. For those replaying a game or mission, being able to effectively fast forward through non-interactive segments of any given title is a satisfying time saver. Some games even allow us the opportunity to skip ahead line by line, which is even better, as when combined with subtitles, it lets us read ahead at our own speed, allowing us to glean all of the relevant information and then get us back to the action as quickly as possible. Many games also feature cutscenes right before tricky moments like boss battles, and being able to skip through these is an absolute lifeline to frustrated players who keep getting bested by a strong enemy and want to avoid seeing the same cinematic over and over again. Luckily, this feature has all but become the norm, and we're now at the point that the rare occurrence of unskippable cutscenes or dialogue is typically met with a loud sigh of irritation. Number 3. Leveling up. Way back in the days of gaming yore, our protagonist had a certain set of skills from the start, and we gamers were grateful for it. As the medium evolved though, someone worked out that it might be a good idea to slowly introduce new and more powerful abilities, and games have never quite been the same since. The whole idea of leveling up is now such a fundamental part of most games that we hardly give it much thought, but once upon a time it was a new and exciting idea. It not only offered a progression system to help players track their progress and encourage them to keep playing, but it also effectively kept gameplay exciting by regularly introducing new and better abilities. Before you rush to the comment section, we are very much aware that games don't necessarily need a level up system to do any of the above, but it's certainly a well-established means to an end. Though there are many good games that don't feature any sort of leveling up, we still can't help but feel that the gaming industry would be far worse off without this tried and true mechanic. Number 2. Fast travel. Massive open world games are great, and exploring them is certainly half the fun, That said, once we've adventured our way across hostile terrain, laying waste to all the enemies we encounter, we're not exactly dying to do it again. And that's where fast travel comes in. Because once upon a time, a developer decided that unnecessary walking was for losers. Each game's rules about fast travel vary slightly, and it exists in just about every form imaginable. Some games let players ride taxis from place to place, and will even simulate the entire journey if players so choose. Most only allow fast travels to locations previously visited, while others let players zap themselves straight into the unknown frontiers of their respective game worlds. An open world game without any fast travel would require hours and hours of mind-numbing walking, and that's just not something we can bring ourselves to tolerate. No, whatever rules may be imposed upon it, and however much of the game's fictional currency it might cost, we absolutely refuse to make the journey manually. As simple an innovation as fast travel is, it's one that has saved us countless repetitive trips across the same game worlds, and for that, we love it. And number 1, autosave. Of all the features in all the games in all the world, none are quite as essential as the autosave. At some point in our lives, we've all played through a lengthy section of game only to die and remember that we'd forgotten to make a recent save, effectively losing hours of effort in the process. It's equal parts frustrating and heartbreaking, and it's a pain that none of us soon forget. Autosave might not entirely prevent those nightmarish moments, but it does offer some modicum of relief. Most modern games come with an autosave feature of some description to quietly preserve our progress, meaning that we're free to play to our heart's content, without too much concern. For those players who forget to make regular saves, autosave is more than just a simple feature. It's a lifeline, a ray of light in the abject darkness of despair. A world without autosave is a world without hope, and that's not a world that we want to live in. Okay, maybe it's not quite as dramatic as that, but commonplace though it may be, it's certainly a feature that we wouldn't ever want to be without. You know, unless we actually want that from a game. Looking at you, roguelikes.